My name is Aurelia, and I am a clinical psychologist. For 8 years, my husband Davenport told everyone in my life that I was losing my mind. He told my sister I was paranoid. He told my mother I was forgetting things. He told our friends I needed help. He told the children's pediatrician that I had been crying for no reason. He told the woman who cleaned our house every other Tuesday that he was worried about leaving me alone with the kids. What he did not know is that I had been recording him in my own home for 6 of those 8 years. 473 voice memos, 1,140 pages of transcripts. And last Thursday, in a courtroom in downtown Columbus, his own voice finally answered for him. I am Aurelia Schoonmaker. I am 38 years old. This is the story of how a man who built his whole life on rewriting other people's memories was finally undone by the only memory he could not touch. Before I tell you what happened in that courtroom, I want to say this. If stories like this find you at the right moment, subscribe. I share a new one every night, quietly, for people who already know what it's like to be told for years that you are the one who is broken. And drop your city and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back to the spring I was 26 when my father said something to me from a hospice bed that I did not understand for almost a decade. My father was Edmund Sutter. He was a clinical psychologist for 41 years. He wore the same brown cardigan every Saturday, the kind with leather elbow patches my mother had sewn back on twice. He kept a Parker fountain pen clipped into the pocket of every shirt he owned. He drank his coffee black from a mug my mother had given him on their 10th anniversary, a cream-colored stoneware mug from a pottery in Yellow Springs, and when the mug finally chipped on the rim, he refused to throw it out. He said a chip in a mug was just proof that the mug had been used by someone who loved it. He said that twice in my life, both times in our kitchen, both times while he was looking at the mug and not at me. He died of pancreatic cancer in April of that year. 3 weeks of decline, then 4 days of clarity, then gone. The hospice was on the east side of Columbus, in a low brick building behind a Kroger, and I drove there every morning that month with a thermos of coffee for my mother and a paperback I never opened. On the second of those clear days, my father asked the nurse to step out, and he held my hand, and he said something I have written down in every notebook I have owned since. He said, "Aurelia, if a person is ever rewriting your memory in real time, the only person who can save you is the version of you who wrote it down before he got there." I thought he was talking about my patients. I thought he was passing me a piece of clinical wisdom for my practice. I told him I would remember it. I kissed his forehead. I drove home and made spaghetti and ate it standing at the counter and went to bed at 8:30. 2 days later, he was gone. 2 years after that, I met Davenport at a charity dinner in Bexley. It was a Friday in October. The room smelled like old wine and gardenias. He was charming in the precise, calibrated way that only certain men are charming. He asked questions and listened to the answers. He remembered the name of my dissertation advisor. He sent flowers the next morning, white peonies, with a note in his own handwriting that said he hoped I had slept well. I was 28 and tired and lonely, and my father had been dead for 2 years, and I thought I had finally met a man who had read enough books to know what kindness looked like. We were engaged within 9 months. We were married within 15. The wedding was at a vineyard in Granville on a Saturday in September. My mother cried during the vows. My sister Helene gave a toast about how I had finally found someone who could keep up with me. The catering was off because the chef's mother had broken her hip the night before, and we ate cold chicken at our own reception and laughed about it. Davenport stood next to me in a charcoal suit and squeezed my hand at the right moments and said all the right things. And I remember thinking that night, lying in the bed of the hotel suite in my mother's borrowed pearls, that I had done it. I had survived my father's death and finished my doctorate and built a practice and married a steady man, and the worst was behind me. The first time he rewrote a conversation, we had been married for 11 months. We were standing in our kitchen on a Sunday morning. The Pyrex bowl my mother had given me at my bridal shower was on the counter, full of pancake batter. There was a Cardinals game on the radio in the next room. Davenport had told me 3 days earlier that he had invited his parents to come stay with us for the entire week of Thanksgiving. I had said no. I had said it kindly, but I had said it clearly. We had been married less than a year, and I was not ready to host his mother for 7 straight days. He had agreed. He had said he understood. He had said he would call them and tell them 4 days would be enough. That Sunday morning, his mother called the house phone to confirm her flight. The flight was for the entire week. When I hung up the phone and looked at him, he tilted his head and he said, "Aurelia, that is what we discussed. You said a week was fine. I asked you twice." He said it gently. He said it the way you speak to someone whose grandmother has just died. And I stood there in my kitchen, holding a wooden spoon, and I felt the floor shift under me because I knew what we had said. But he was so calm and so certain, and I was so tired from a difficult week at the practice that I started to wonder if I had imagined it. I let it go. I made the pancakes. His mother stayed for a week. That is how it starts. Not with a slap, not with a scream, with a wooden spoon and a Pyrex bowl and a Cardinals game on the radio, and a man so calm that you start to question the version of yourself that you trusted 30 seconds earlier. The second time, it was about money. He had told me he had paid the property tax bill on our house. 3 months later, we received a notice from the Franklin County Treasurer that the bill was overdue. When I asked him about it, he frowned and said, "Aurelia, we agreed you were going to handle that one. Do you remember? We were in the car. It was the day you picked up your dry cleaning." We had not been in the car that day. There had been no agreement. The dry cleaning detail was a flourish, the kind of specific texture only a confident man adds to a story he is making up. But there I was again, standing in our hallway, holding a county notice with a red stripe across the top, watching my husband look concerned for me. The third time was about Theo's name. We had agreed, in our second year of marriage, that if we ever had a son, we would name him after my father, Edmund. We had agreed in the kitchen, over takeout on a winter Sunday. 2.5 years later, when I was pregnant, he told me, very gently, that we had never agreed to that I was projecting, that he had always wanted a name from his side of the family. We named the baby Theo because I was too exhausted to fight, and because Theo was a name I liked, and because I was 4 days from my due date and I no longer trusted what I remembered. I started keeping a notebook in my purse. Just a small one, the kind I had carried in graduate school, narrow-ruled, hardbound, with a black elastic loop for a pen. I told myself it was for client notes. I knew it was not. By the end of the second year of our marriage, the notebook had 31 entries. Things he had said, things he had then unsaid. Dates, times, the exact words, the room we had been standing in, what I had been wearing, what he had been drinking. It still was not enough. Because here is what I have learned, both as a psychologist and as a wife. A notebook is your word against his word. A notebook is something a man like Davenport can look at and say, gently, "Sweetheart, you wrote that down because you wanted it to be true." And if he says it with enough patience, in front of enough people, eventually even your sister starts to look at you the way you used to look at unstable patients. The third year of our marriage, our son Theo was born. The fourth year, our daughter Briar. Davenport adored them in front of company. He was distant with them in private. He would tell my mother on the phone, in a low, concerned voice, that I had been emotional that week, that the postpartum had been hard, that he was worried about me. My mother would call me in tears the next day to ask if I was okay. I would tell her I was fine. She would say, "Aurelia, Davenport says you have been crying every day." I had not been crying. I had not cried in front of him in months. But the script had already been written, and I was inside it, and every time I tried to push back, I sounded exactly like the woman he was describing. He did the same thing with my sister. He did the same thing with our pediatrician, a kind woman named Dr. Kazimierz, who took me aside once at a well visit to ask, very gently, if I was getting enough sleep. I had been sleeping 8 hours a night. Davenport had told her at drop-off that I had been up at 3 in the morning crying about nothing. I had not been up at 3 in the morning. He had been. He had been sitting in our living room on his phone, and I had heard him, and I had assumed he was working. He did it at small dinner parties, where the dose was always small enough to seem caring. He would touch my elbow at exactly the right moment and say to whoever was listening, "Aurelia has been working so hard. I keep telling her she does not have to prove anything to anyone." It sounded like love. It functioned like a signature. By the end of every dinner, every guest at the table had a little file in their head labeled, "Aurelia is fragile," and Davenport was very generously holding her together. He did it with our neighbors. He told the woman across the street, the one who always brought us a loaf of banana bread at Christmas, that I had been forgetting to pick the kids up at preschool. I had never forgotten once. The neighbor mentioned it to me casually one afternoon at the mailbox, the way people mention something they hope you will explain. I did not explain. I went inside and I added it to my notebook. He did it with the woman who cleaned our house every other Tuesday, a woman named Olena who had cleaned for us since the year Briar was born. He told her, in a low, concerned voice in the front hallway, that I had been hiding things around the house and forgetting where I had put them, and would she please let him know if she ever found anything strange? Alina told me about it the same afternoon, in a quiet, frightened voice, in our laundry room. She said, in her careful English, "Mrs. Schoonmaker, I do not believe him. But I think you should know what he is asking me." I thanked her. I gave her a key to a different door of the house, the side door off the garage that Davenport never used, and I told her if she ever needed to come and go without him knowing she was there, she should come through that door. She nodded once. She kept her word. There was the night he told my brother-in-law at our kitchen island that I had stopped taking my anxiety medication. I have never been on anxiety medication. There was the afternoon he told the woman who cuts my hair that I had been distracted lately because of a difficult patient. The patient he was referring to did not exist. I have not had a male patient in 7 years. There was the morning at Theo's first soccer game when he told another father, in a low voice meant to carry, that the divorce was not something he had ever wanted, but that he had to think about the children. We were not getting divorced. I had not even known he had been thinking about it. He was simply rehearsing for an audience. There was the Christmas morning, our 7th, when he gave me a leather-bound planner as a gift. He pressed it into my hands in front of his parents and my mother and the children, and he said, with the tilt of the head, "I thought this might help." Everyone smiled politely. My mother understood, finally, that morning, although she did not know yet that she understood. I saw it move across her face for half a second. Then she covered it. The planner stayed wrapped in its tissue paper for 6 months. I never used it. I never threw it out. It is still in a drawer in my home office. There was the evening of my dissertation advisor's retirement party, the only night of that year that had been entirely mine. I had bought a black dress for it. I had practiced my toast in the bathroom mirror. Davenport watched me put on lipstick at our bedroom vanity and said, very softly, "Sweetheart, you look beautiful, but I want you to know I am proud of you whether or not you can get through the speech tonight." I had given hundreds of speeches. I had presented at conferences in 3 countries. He said it the way you say something to a frightened child. I gave the toast that night, perfectly, in front of 200 people. He told my mother the next morning that he had been worried for me the entire night. That was the year I started recording. It was not a plan. It was a Tuesday night in February, and we had just had a conversation in the kitchen about whether I had agreed to host his entire firm at our house for a holiday party in 3 weeks. I had not agreed. He insisted I had. He said, with that tilt of the head, that I needed to stop doing this. That my memory had not been right since Theo was born. That maybe I should call Dr. Brennan and ask about anti-anxiety medication. I went into our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, I looked at my phone. I opened the Voice Memos app. I had used it twice before for client notes I had wanted to dictate while driving. I created a new memo. I named it Kitchen. I tapped record. I held the phone in my lap. I went back into the kitchen, put the phone face down on the counter next to the fruit bowl, and I asked him, very quietly, to tell me again about the firm party we had supposedly discussed. He did. He told me, on the record, that we had agreed to it on a Saturday afternoon at the lake house 2 weekends earlier. He gave me details. He told me what I had been wearing. He told me what he had been drinking. He told me I had said it would be a chance to show his colleagues our home. He told me I had used the word important. He told me I had laughed. We had not been at the lake house 2 weekends earlier. We had been at my sister's birthday dinner at a restaurant in German village called Lindy's. The lake house had been closed for the season since November, the water shut off, the back deck stacked with patio chairs covered in a blue tarp. There were 6 other people who could verify that, including my sister and my mother and the waiter at Lindy's who had served us all dinner and remembered our table because Helene had cried when my mother gave a toast. He had built an entire fictional Saturday for me, with weather, with dialogue, with a glass of wine in his hand, with a comment I had supposedly made about his colleagues' wives. I went back into the bedroom. I tapped stop. I named the file kitchen. I locked my phone. I sat on the edge of the bed and I did not cry. I did not feel triumphant. I felt the way you feel when a tumor finally shows up on a scan after years of being told you are fine. Confirmed. I called my old doctoral supervisor the next morning. Her name is Mara Lindbeck. She had been my mentor at Ohio State, and she had moved into family court work as an expert witness almost a decade ago. I did not tell her what was happening. I just asked her, hypothetically, about admissibility, about one-party consent recording in Ohio, about what a pattern of contradicting recordings might look like in a custody context. She listened for a long time. She did not ask me why. She just said, "Aurelia, in Ohio, you may legally record any conversation in which you are a participant. Save them. Back them up to a separate cloud account he does not have access to. Label them, date them, and do not tell him." Then she said, "And call me when you are ready." I started the next day. 473 voice memos. 6 years. Every conversation he later denied. Every promise he insisted I had imagined. Every threat he later swore he had never made. Every comment about my body, my career, my mothering, my sanity. The car. The kitchen. The bedroom. Christmas at his parents' house in Worthington. The drive home from Theo's preschool concert. The Saturday morning he told me, very quietly, that he had read my client notes the night before and that he was concerned about my emotional involvement with one of them. He had not read my client notes. He could not have. They were on a separate, encrypted server through my practice. But he wanted me to think he could. He wanted me to feel the walls of my professional life moving inward. I labeled each one with a single word. The room, or the place, or the holiday. I never used names. I never used dates in the file titles. From the outside, my Voice Memos app looked like a clinician's dictation folder. Inside, it was the receipts of a marriage. I want to tell you about one of them because it explains why I kept going. It was the night of our 7th anniversary. We were at a steakhouse downtown called Hyde Park, the kind with leather booths and waiters in vests and a bread service that includes warm rolls and a linen napkin. Davenport had ordered a bottle of Cabernet and was halfway through his second glass. I asked him, very casually, if he remembered the night of our first anniversary, when we had stayed home and made pasta and watched an old movie on the couch. He smiled at me. He took a sip of wine. He said, "Aurelia, sweetheart, we went to Italy for our first anniversary. You are doing it again. Should we talk to someone about this?" We had not gone to Italy on our first anniversary. We had gone to Italy on our third. He knew it. I knew it. The waiter, who had been our waiter for 3 years and had served us our third anniversary dinner the night before we flew out, knew it. But Davenport said it with that tilt of the head, in that gentle voice, and the waiter looked at me and I saw the flicker. The flicker I had seen in my mother's eyes, in my sister's eyes, in our friend's eyes, in Dr. Kazimierz's eyes at the 4-month well visit. The flicker of a person recalibrating who the broken one in this marriage actually was. I had my phone face down on the table. I always did by then. The memo was running. When I got home, I labeled it anniversary and I added it to the folder. There were so many of those. There was the night he told my brother-in-law, at our kitchen island, that I had stopped taking my anxiety medication. I have never been on anxiety medication. There was the afternoon he told the woman who cuts my hair that I had been distracted lately because of a difficult patient. The patient he was referring to did not exist. I have not had a male patient in 7 years. There was the morning at Theo's first soccer game when he told another father, in a low voice meant to carry, that the divorce was not something he had ever wanted, but that he had to think about the children. We were not getting divorced. I had not even known he had been thinking about it. He was simply rehearsing for an audience. Have you ever had to stay silent to protect yourself, even when every part of you wanted to speak up? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. The 8th year of our marriage was the year he started to plan in earnest. I did not know it at the time. I knew only that something had shifted. He was kinder to the children in front of my mother. He was warmer to my sister. He took Theo to 2 crew games and posted the photos on his work, linked in with captions about being a dad first. He started attending a Methodist church in Upper Arlington and made sure to be photographed greeting the pastor. He started telling people at dinner parties that he was worried about me. Not unkindly, concerned. He had read an article about high-functioning anxiety in women in their late 30s. He thought maybe I was not sleeping well. He thought maybe my practice had become too demanding. He thought maybe, between us, I needed a break. I recognized the pattern from my own clinical work. I had seen it in 3 or 4 custody evaluations across my career, on the rare occasions a family attorney had pulled me in as a consult. A spouse who is preparing to file for divorce and who plans to seek primary custody often spends 6 to 12 months preloading the social network with concerns about the other parent's mental stability. By the time the petition is filed, half the people in the marriage's life have already heard, gently, calmly, repeatedly, that one parent is not well. The clinical literature calls it predicate laying. In family court, it is called weaponized concern. In real life, it is called a man at a barbecue tilting his head at a neighbor and saying, very softly, that his wife has not been herself. He was building a case. And I was the case. I did 3 things that month. I did not tell him about any of them. The first thing I did was call Mara Lindbeck. I told her, finally, what was happening. I told her about the memos. I told her about the notebooks. I told her about the 8 years. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, very gently, "Aurelia, I have been waiting for this call for 4 years." I started to cry, which I had not done in front of anyone since my father's funeral. She let me cry. Then she said, "Send me everything, encrypted, tonight." The second thing I did was hire a family attorney named Wendell Ostrowski. He had been recommended to me years earlier by a colleague who had gone through a contested custody case with a narcissistic ex. Wendell was 61, soft-spoken, and wore the same pair of brown loafers he had inherited from his father, leather-worn pale at the toes. He kept a bowl of butterscotch candies on his desk in a glass dish. His secretary refilled every Friday. His office was on the 11th floor of a building on Broad Street, with a window that looked out at the State House. He listened to me for 2 hours without interrupting. He took notes on a yellow legal pad with a pen that had Ostrowski family law printed down the side. When I was done, he said, "Dr. Schoonmaker, I have practiced family law in this county for 33 years. What you have on that phone is the most thoroughly documented gaslighting campaign I have ever been handed. We do not need to win this case. We just need to let him walk into it." The third thing I did was open a separate cloud account in my maiden name on a laptop he had never touched, and I exported every single voice memo to it as a backup. Then I burned them to 2 encrypted USB drives, and I gave one to my sister Helene and one to Mara, with a sealed letter explaining what they were and what to do if anything happened to me. My sister read the letter in her kitchen and called me 20 minutes later and said only, "I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I am so sorry." She said it 3 times because she had been one of the people he had been calling for years to tell that I was struggling. I told her it was okay. I told her she was not the first sister in history to be lied to by a brother-in-law. I told her I needed her now more than I had needed her then, and that this was the part where she was going to help me. She said, "Tell me what to do." I said, "Be normal. Be exactly as normal as you have always been. Do not change a single thing in front of him." She was. She did. She was magnificent. Then I waited. He filed for divorce on a Tuesday in March. He served me the papers at my office, which was a particular kind of cruelty I will not waste your time on. The process server was a polite young man with a folder under his arm who apologized when I opened the door. He requested primary residential custody of both children. His petition described me as suffering from chronic anxiety, intermittent dissociative episodes, and an inability to accurately recall recent events. He included 3 sworn affidavits, one from his mother, one from his brother, one from a couple's therapist we had seen for 2 months in our 5th year of marriage, whose notes he had apparently obtained without my consent, and who, conveniently, did not remember me well. I read the petition in my office with the door closed. I did not call Mara. I did not call Helene. I did not call Wendell. I sat in my chair and I looked at the framed photograph of my father on the bookshelf, the one from his retirement dinner, the one where he is wearing the brown cardigan and holding the chipped mug. I said out loud to him, "I wrote it down, Daddy. I wrote all of it down." Then I picked up the phone and I called Wendell. The custody hearing was set for the 3rd week of October. 8 months out. Davenport spent those 8 months exactly the way I had predicted he would. He took the children to brunches at restaurants with brick patios and posted photos. He made sure to be photographed greeting the Methodist pastor in Upper Arlington 2 Sundays in a row. He sent flowers to my mother on her birthday for the first time in 6 years, white tulips with a card that said simply, "Thinking of you, D." He wrote a long, sad email to my sister in which he expressed his deep concern for me and asked her to please reach out if she noticed any further deterioration. Helene forwarded the email to me with one line above it. I have a recording of him telling me, "You are the most stable person he knows." From 4 years ago. I still have it. He started a journal he showed our therapist, a small leather one, in which he had been writing down incidents of concerning behavior by me. None of them had happened. The journal had 2-week-old entries that purportedly described scenes from years before. Wendell read it once and put it down and said, "He has overplayed his hand. He is not as careful as he thinks." That was the only time I ever heard Wendell sound surprised. I did not respond to any of it. I did not engage. Wendell had told me, our first meeting, that the only mistake I could make in those 8 months was to seem rattled. So I did not seem rattled. I went to work. I picked up the children from school. I cooked dinner. I read to Briar at night the same 3 picture books in rotation, the one about the bear who couldn't sleep, the one about the rabbit who lost a button, the one about the moon. I did the laundry. I drank my coffee black from the mug my sister had given me in graduate school, the one with a hairline cracked down the side, and I waited. Wendell and Mara worked through the audio for 6 months. They selected 3 files, just 3, out of the 473. They told me that more would seem vindictive. 3 was enough, 3 was a pattern, 3 was a doctrine. The first one was the kitchen recording from the Tuesday night in February of our 3rd year, the firm party that never existed. The second one was the steakhouse anniversary, with the waiter audible in the background, with the clink of a glass and a phrase in Italian from a passing busser. The third one was a recording from our 6th year, in which Davenport, sitting in our living room, told me very calmly that I had given him permission, 18 months earlier, to take out a personal line of credit in my name, and that my failure to remember this conversation was further evidence that I needed psychiatric evaluation. I had not given him permission. The line of credit existed. The signatures on the application, when Wendell pulled them, did not match mine. They were close. They were not mine. The forensic handwriting analyst Wendell hired, a quiet man in his 60s named Mr. Petty, took one afternoon with the documents and produced a 4-page report concluding that the signatures had been produced by a different writer who was attempting to imitate mine. He testified later that the analysis was, in his words, not a close call. The hearing was at the Franklin County Domestic Relations Court on a Tuesday morning in October. The building is a mid-century slab on South High Street, with marble floors that show every footprint and a security line that snakes around the metal detectors. I wore a navy blue dress my mother had bought me for my dissertation defense 12 years earlier, with my grandmother's pearl earrings and a pair of low black pumps I had broken in over a year of court visits with Wendell. I carried the same small notebook I had been carrying since my second year of marriage. Theo was at school. Briar was at my sister's house. My mother sat in the gallery in a beige cardigan and held a Kleenex she did not use. Davenport sat across the aisle in a charcoal suit, the same one he had worn to our wedding, which I noticed and did not let myself feel anything about. His mother, Cordelia Schoonmaker, sat directly behind him in a cream blazer with a gold pin shaped like a dogwood blossom. She had not spoken to me in 6 months. She had submitted a sworn affidavit describing me as a deeply troubled young woman who has been a source of concern in our family for many years. She had sat at my dining room table for 8 Thanksgivings. She had given Theo a silver rattle the day he was born. She had cried at my baby shower. None of that mattered now. She had chosen her son. She believed her son. She had no idea what her son sounded like in a kitchen. Have you ever had someone in your family ever try to rewrite who you are to make themselves look better? What's something you knew was true for years before anyone else admitted it? Tell me in the comments. I will read them all. His attorney went first. He spent 40 minutes painting a portrait of a brilliant, successful, deeply patient husband who had endured years of his wife's deteriorating mental state for the sake of his children. He read excerpts from the affidavits. He referenced the couple's counselor. He produced a printout of 3 text messages I had sent Davenport during a particularly bad week the previous winter, in which I had apologized for forgetting a dentist appointment. He held up the printout and let it hang in the air. He used the word concerning 11 times in 40 minutes. I counted in my notebook. He sat down. Wendell stood up slowly. He buttoned his suit jacket. He said, "Your Honor, with the court's permission, we would like to play 3 short audio recordings, all properly authenticated, all lawfully recorded under Ohio's one-party consent statute, all part of an evidentiary submission filed with this court 6 weeks ago." The judge, a woman in her late 50s named Honor Brennan, looked at Davenport's attorney. His attorney objected on grounds of privacy and authentication. The judge listened. She asked Wendell 3 questions. She listened to his answers. She overruled the objection. She nodded at Wendell. Wendell pressed play on a small black speaker on our table. The first recording was 47 seconds long. It was Davenport's voice, in our kitchen, telling me about the lake house weekend that had not happened. I heard him describe the weather. I heard him describe my dress, a green one I did not own. I heard him describe the wine in his hand, a Chardonnay he had supposedly poured at 3 in the afternoon at a closed-up lake house in November. The courtroom was silent. Davenport's attorney shifted in his seat. Davenport himself did not move. I watched him out of the corner of my eye. I watched his hands. They did not tremble. He was a careful man even now. The second recording was 22 seconds long. It was the steakhouse anniversary. You could hear the waiter in the background asking about dessert. You could hear the clink of a wine glass. You could hear Davenport say, "Aurelia, sweetheart, we went to Italy for our first anniversary. You are doing it again. Should we talk to someone about this?" The voice on the recording was warm and gentle and perfectly calibrated. The judge tilted her head a fraction of an inch. I do not think anyone else saw it. The third recording was 1 minute and 4 seconds long. It was the line of credit conversation. Davenport's voice, calm as a Sunday morning, telling me that I had agreed to put my signature on a document that was at that moment sitting in a folder in Wendell's briefcase, with Mr. Stubben. Petty's report attached, concluding that the signature was not mine. You could hear the dishwasher running in the background. You could hear, faintly, the Cardinals game on the radio. You could hear my voice, once, very quietly, asking him if he was sure. You could hear him laugh. When the third recording ended, the courtroom did not move. And then a sound came from the gallery. a small sound, a woman's voice. It was not loud, it was not a sob. It was a single, sharp inhale followed by two words, very clearly spoken, in a voice I had heard at every Thanksgiving for 8 years. Cordelia Schoonmaker, my mother-in-law, said, "Oh, Davenport." That was it, 2 words. From the woman who had spent the last 6 months telling everyone in our extended family that I was disturbed. She said it the way a mother says something when she finally, irrevocably, sees her son. The judge looked at her. Davenport's attorney looked at her. Davenport, for the first time that morning, turned around in his seat and looked at his mother. And his mother did not look back. She was looking at her own hands, folded in her lap, and the gold dogwood pin on her cream blazer caught the fluorescent light, and I thought very clearly of the first Thanksgiving she had been at our table, the year Theo was born, when she had told me a story about her own mother that I had liked. The judge wrote for a long time on her notepad. The pen scratched. The room held its breath. Then she set down her pen. She granted me primary residential custody of both children. She ordered Davenport to undergo a full psychological evaluation before any unsupervised visitation could resume. She referred the forged signature on the line of credit to the county prosecutor's office for review. She ordered him to pay temporary spousal and child support effective immediately. She told him, with a flatness, "I will remember for the rest of my life that the court found his pattern of behavior toward the petitioner to constitute sustained psychological coercion of a kind that this court takes very seriously when minor children are present in the home." She banged the gavel. We were done by 11 minutes past noon. I did not cry. I did not look at him. I walked out of that courtroom holding Wendell's arm, and my mother walked beside me, and Mara was waiting in the hallway with a paper coffee cup from the place across the street, and she handed it to me without a word. I drank it standing up, in the hallway, in front of the elevators. It was bitter and over-roasted and exactly what I needed. My mother put her hand on my back. She did not say anything. She just kept her hand there until the elevator opened. What I have learned is that consequences do not arrive in a single thunderclap. They arrive in slow, embarrassing waves, the way the tide comes in. You stand on the beach. You feel the water at your ankles. You look up an hour later and you cannot find your shoes. 2 weeks after the hearing, Davenport's brokerage placed him on administrative leave. One of the recordings Wendell had filed under seal, but had not played in court, contained Davenport bragging to a colleague at our kitchen island about a client whose financial information he was sharing improperly. The client's attorney had quietly subpoenaed the audio as part of a separate civil suit. Davenport was terminated for cause within the month. His non-compete kept him out of commercial real estate in 3 counties for 18 months. The firm's general counsel called Wendell to thank him for the heads-up, which Wendell had given them 4 months earlier as a professional courtesy. I had not known that. Wendell had not told me, because Wendell does not tell anyone anything they do not need to know. His mother Cordelia called me a week after the hearing. I let it go to voicemail the first time. I let it go to voicemail the second time. The third time, I picked up. She did not waste my time with a long apology. She said, "Aurelia, I would like to take you to lunch when you are ready. There are things I should have seen and did not. I will not ask you to forgive me. I will only ask if you will let me know my grandchildren without him in the room." We had lunch 6 weeks later at a small place in Clintonville, a deli with a chalkboard menu and brown paper napkins. She wore the same dogwood pin. She did not cry. She did say, at the end, "He is my son, but you are the mother of my grandchildren." And I made a choice between those 2 things in October, and I will not be making it again. 3 months later, she revised her will. I learned about that from a probate attorney friend, not from her. She did not tell me. She did not need to. His brother Hollis, who had submitted the second affidavit, sent me an email that I have not opened. It has been sitting in my inbox for 14 days. The subject line is just my name and a comma. I do not know if I will open it. Wendell tells me I do not have to. The couple's therapist, the one who had not remembered me well, was investigated by the state board after Mara filed a complaint about the unauthorized release of session notes. She accepted a voluntary suspension of her license. She is no longer in practice in Ohio. I do not feel bad about that. She had a duty. She broke it. The board did exactly what it should have done. My sister Helene came to my house the night of the hearing and slept on my couch in her work clothes because she did not want me to be alone. She had brought a casserole in a Pyrex dish I recognized from our mother's kitchen, a tuna noodle thing with crushed potato chips on top that was the only thing my mother had ever made for us when one of us was sick. We ate it cold at midnight, standing at the counter, and she said, very quietly, "I should have known." I said, "He is very good at this." "It is not your fault that you are not," she said. "It is a little bit my fault." I let her have that. Sometimes the apology a person needs to give is not the one you need to receive. My mother, who had spent 6 years getting tearful phone calls from Davenport about my deterioration, asked me one question, the morning after the hearing, sitting at my kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a coffee mug. She said, "Aurelia, why didn't you ever tell me?" I said, "Mom, every time I tried, he had already called you that morning." She put her hand over her mouth. She nodded. She said, "I will never doubt you again." She has not once. She has not asked me a single question about my mental state since that morning, and she used to ask me 3 or 4 a week. The pediatrician, Dr. Kazimierz, sent me a card after she heard. It was a plain white card with a single line in her handwriting. It said, "I am sorry I did not know what I was looking at. Please bring the children in whenever you need to." I read it once and put it in the drawer of my nightstand and closed the drawer. I have not read it again. I do not need to. People keep asking me if I feel vindicated, if I feel like I won, if I feel like justice was served. I do not feel any of that. I feel tired. I feel cleansed. I feel the way you feel after 8 years of holding your breath, when someone finally tells you that you can exhale and you realize you have forgotten how. I do not feel like I won. I feel like I survived. There is a difference, and the people who have lived this know exactly what that difference is. I have not listened to any of the recordings since the hearing. They are still on the encrypted drives. Mara has one. Helene has one. I do not need to listen to them. I lived inside them for 8 years. The work, now, is to live outside them. The kids are okay. Theo is 6 and asks careful questions and is satisfied with careful answers. Briar is 4 and does not yet need answers, just bedtime stories and the same 3 books in rotation. They see their father every other Saturday at a supervised visitation center on the west side, a low brick building with toys in primary colors and a woman named Janelle who watches the room and makes notes. Davenport hates it. He hates the pretzel sticks they hand out. He hates that there is a window in the door. He has told the supervisor twice that the arrangement is humiliating. The supervisor has noted it twice in the file. What I want to tell you, before I close, is this. Real love does not test you to prove you deserve it. Real love does not require you to second-guess your own memory in order to keep the peace. The people who love you do not ask you to mistrust yourself as the price of being chosen. If a person's affection costs you the version of yourself who knows what is true, that is not love. That is rent. And the rent goes up every year until you cannot afford to live in your own mind. The thing about my father, the thing I did not understand for almost a decade, is that he was not giving me clinical advice in that hospice room. He was giving me a survival instruction. He was a clinician for 41 years. He had seen, hundreds of times, what happens to a person whose memory is rewritten by someone they love. He knew, somehow, in those last clear days, that I was going to need it. So he handed it to me in a single sentence, and I carried it without understanding it for 9 years. And then one Tuesday night in February, I sat on the edge of my bed, and I opened a voice memos app, and I finally heard what he had been telling me. The version of you who writes things down before he gets there is the version of you who saves your life. Not because you are paranoid, because you are paying attention. I tell one of these stories every night. Some nights I sit at my kitchen table after the kids are asleep, with my coffee and my father's chipped mug, and I wonder if anyone out there is listening. Then I read the comments, and I know. There's another one waiting for tomorrow night. There's no shortage of these stories. That's the saddest part of all of this. If you could protect one thing in your life, a place, a person, a promise, what would it be? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. If this one stayed with you, the story on your screen right now is for you. It's about a woman whose stepfather staged a fake will reading in her dead mother's living room, and the sealed envelope a parish priest had been holding for 8 years that ended every word of it. Tap the card. I'll see you there.